All right, so it's a great pleasure to have Marieke van Erp with us today. Marieke is leading the Digital Humanities Research Lab at the No Humanities Cluster. She and her group made a lot of contribution to digital methods in humanities research, as you will see. And so I can talk a lot about Marieke. She's been in our domain, and I think I see her at every conference in semantic web or link data on a regular basis. But one very important news in the curriculum of Marieke is that she just was awarded an ERC, Consolidator Grant, which, as you know, is a very selective grant. It's a 5-year project which is devoted to improving language and semantic web technologies to create better knowledge graph for humanity research. So as you have guessed by now, she has a specialty in digital humanities. And today she will be presenting a work on data sciencing big old archives. Yes. Thank you very much, and the mic is yours.
All right. Well, thank you so much for having me, and thank you very much for the really warm welcome in this group. And I'd just like to talk a little bit about the work we do, but also how we do the work. Because it can be kind of complicated to work across different disciplines, but I think it can also be very valuable, and I'd like to share some of that experiences with you. Let's see. Yeah. It takes a little while for it to refresh. I guess there was already an introduction, so thank you for that. I should also say that this visit here was made possible by the thematic semester Digital Humanities and AI, sponsored by the AISSAI Department of CNRS. So that's really awesome that I could be here for 3 weeks. So really, interdisciplinary research is a two-way street. Computer scientists, they're very smart and they're lovely people, but it's very hard to be at the top of multiple fields. So they often don't know what's interesting or relevant for humanities scholars. And the other way around, so humanities scholars also don't always know what is interesting and relevant for computer scientists, or even what is possible with the current technology. So what we really work on in my group is try to bridge that gap between the different disciplines. And also in my research group, we are based at a humanities institute, but the group is very mixed. So we have people who come from computer science and got into humanities later. We also have people who really have a background in humanities and then came to computer science technologies later. And we do a lot of talking. There has to be a lot of talking, a lot of communication. And then, so really the best projects, I think, that are projects that have research questions from both sides, so that are really interesting for the humanities scholars, but that also really push the boundaries of computer science. And that is, usually we're not building the next algorithm, but we see how the algorithm or other approach needs to be adapted to this particular use case. And that has its own challenges, and that I think is yeah, that's the space we work in. So some of you work in humanities, but some of you don't, and also there might be some people online. So a lot of traditional humanities research is qualitative, and not all of it, but you know, I'm sort of generalizing a little bit. And then digital humanities is a bit more quantitative, but ideally it's a bit of a mix of both. And you can analyze these data sets at different levels. So traditionally, the humanities research is qualitative. There was also talk of close reading and distant reading. So close reading is really the scholar going into a text or an artwork and really going at very detailed level. In the beginning, when digital humanities first started, it was really at the distant reading level, so very much macro, very shallow in a way. And we try to find ways between this. And this picture is, it comes from a paper called Datascopes, which is written by 2 colleagues on my team. And they try to also look at the process of digital humanities and map that and research that So this is part of also how you can go about the different steps in a research project, and also how to document them, and how to make sure that your research then maybe becomes reproducible. Some of the other things they've done is also look into coding literacy, so doing a big survey among humanities researchers. So we also kind of look at the process of doing digital humanities on my team. We have a variety of data sets that we work with. So just in my team, and we don't do computer vision, for example, even though that is another part of humanities research, or we also don't do GIS, although we do have some people in the institute that do. But we mostly work on text and structured data. So we have digitized letters, we have newspapers, we have employment records from hundreds of years ago. We look at novels. We have people also look at literature reviews. So how is literature received by different groups of people? We also have government reports, we have company reports, we have recipes, we have basically anything. Most of it in Dutch, but we also have a few other language resources. And this is a picture that we like to show, and it's nice and clean. We work together. So this was a use case from the Ojuropa project that I will be talking about, where you start out with a conversation, go like, hey, what are the interesting concepts in the domain that we should be looking at, or that our tools should be able to deal with. So the humanities scholar or the historian goes like, well, you know, these are the core concepts in our domain, and they should go in the taxonomy. And then we come up with a draft taxonomy, we refine it, and then we start the annotation process, and then we have a data set, and then we have an approach. Really, it looks more like this. You can't really do this by having a meeting and then go back to your own offices and 3 weeks later come say, here's the taxonomy, this is version 1 and we're going to fix it, then we have version 2 and that's going to be it. And that is, I think, where sometimes some of the frustration comes from in projects where it's not always recognized. So you have to ask the question, really, when you say this, do you mean this or that? And it's a lot of whiteboarding, a lot of communication, and it's still hard. I've been doing this for a while, but when you sort of get that understanding, it can be so cool. So that's why I love doing these projects, even though I sometimes make life a bit harder on myself than if I were to just work in one domain. So I would really like to highlight 2 projects that we're working on. So the first one is dealing with colonial language, which in a way is related to some of the work here on hate speech, although on different types of data sets. And the second project is a EU project that we finished at the end of last year, which is the history and heritage of smell. So we're dealing with colonial language. We have a virtual lab, which is called the Cultural AI Lab. My lab is part of it, but it's a collaboration between 4 research institutes and 4 cultural heritage institutes. So we have museums, libraries, and archives being part of that collaboration. And really what we try to do is make these, make AI tools work better for this domain. We're dealing with text, or archives or collections that are sometimes hundreds of years old. They have been digitized, but they do represent the world as it was 200 years ago, or even longer ago, with all the things that come with it. So I'm going to have to put a disclaimer here. We're going to be talking about harmful language. So there will be some terms on my slides that we now deem derogatory. And these are really just illustrations of what we're dealing with. And I do think we have a job as researchers, but also working together with heritage institutions to find a better way of dealing with this. So we do need to do this kind of research to track down harmful language And also, how do we present it then to audiences? Because you can't just blank it out. It is part of our history, and we have to come to terms with that in the most respectful way possible. So that's what we're doing, and I'll give some warnings when the nasty examples come up. So as I said, these archives that they represent sometimes outdated ideas, and that is reflected in the language. So we want to deal with that, and I've listed some of the papers that I'm presenting on in this. So we first started out with this a couple of years ago and thinking, well, what is this thing of charged terminology? So people have ideas about it, but it's not as clear cut. You can't just say this is, you can't just add in a dictionary saying, well, this term you shouldn't use and that term you should use. So we started out in researching what is it actually in this space that makes language harmful. We did not start from scratch. There is the Words Matter guide for word choices in the cultural sector, which was created by a collective of researchers at one of the museums that we work with. This list contains about 50 Dutch and about 50 English terms that they have come across in their museum collections, in their older descriptions. And what they've done in this guide is list these words, explaining in what context they were used, why it is deemed not such a good term to use anymore, and possible alternatives. So they have a spreadsheet at the museum where they keep all this and they turn that into a nice booklet. And you can use that in a traditional museum setting where you put together an exhibition, and for every painting, they take great care, the curators, in putting in a little description of the artwork that you see in the gallery. And you could write these descriptions with that list next to it, and make sure you don't use offensive terms, or if you use the term, add an explanation, add a contextualization. And that is really up to the museums on how they want to deal with it. And they have, Rijksmuseum, for example, where this picture is from, they have a terminology working group thinking about this as well. And you can do this when it's a limited set of objects. However, galleries, libraries, archives, museums, they have literally billions of pages of digitized context that they are also making available via their websites. You can go to these websites and you can browse the collection, and cleaning that up is undoable manually. And this is not just a problem that we have in the Netherlands. I know the Bibliothèque Nationale de France also has a really cool online collection. And interestingly enough, a lot of content is also very rarely accessed by users. So my colleagues Miriam and Jacco, and Linda, they did a query log-based assessment of retrievability bias. So they looked at the queries and the results that came back, and the majority of the results never even came back. And that's also in the list of hundreds of results. And then what people click on is an even smaller portion. So there's a lot of hidden data there. And the other part of this is that simply finding and replacing contentious or charged terms, that is just way too crude. Like the word for the color black in some cases used to be used for people of color in the Netherlands, and now that is deemed derogatory, but of course the color is still there, so you can't just delete all of that. So the first thing we started out to do, and this is work led by PhD candidate Andrei Nestorov, is to turn this Words Matter vocabulary into a linked data vocabulary. And the nice thing about the booklet is that it has structure. So we could really use that to say, oh, there's a title. We know the title is a contentious term, and then the description has an explanation about why this is contentious. and some suggestions, and they also have the suggestions at the bottom. Turns out we did need to figure out how to model this, so we could not find any existing ontologies that would correctly label this for us or correctly model this. So some additional concepts were defined there. We also have there needs to be a context, so a literal form, and also a suggested label. So that is for the alternatives that you can suggest. And then, yeah, this is just the numbers. So we have a bit more than 111 contentious terms there. And this is the schema. You can also find this online. Let's just go through this. And we also managed to link this to some external or other LOD resources, and really finding that, so the one in the bottom right there is the World Culture or World Museum. They changed their name recently. So they're the ones who publish the words matter vocabulary, and their thesaurus, it's already quite cleaned up, I guess, so we didn't find too many links there. Interestingly enough, in Wikidata, when you go to the resource of some of these contentious terms, Wikidata does not have this type of information that the words matter publication has. So it will just have the term slave, and it doesn't really say that it's something that we'd rather not use anymore these days. And so similar things for WordNet and the Getty. And this is something that we'd love to extend also maybe to other languages. So if anyone is interested in working with us on that, please get in touch. Yeah, and this is where you can find it. So I can also make the slides available for people who are interested in that. And in this same project, so André is funded by the Dutch Research Council. We have another PhD candidate working, Ryan Breit, and he's working more on the NLP side of this problem. So what he's trying to do is to find what are the contexts in which we find these type of terms, and could I actually leverage that to find particular characteristics as well as other problematic terms that might not have been in our initial vocabulary. So this was a paper that we presented last year at the Language Data and Knowledge Conference, asking basically three things, like can we find these type of contextual features? Also, are there sort of particular patterns that we find? And then can we use those patterns or features to identify additional instances? What we did for this, we took a slightly different data set because there's basically more data in newspapers. And the Dutch National Library has digitized a huge portion of their newspapers from the 17th century on that can be easily used for research. So that's an amazing resource. We're very grateful for that. We just looked to last between 1950 and 1990 because we do know that OCR on this is a little bit better than some of the other, because it's also, they didn't digitize it all at the same time. So we do know that certain parts have just better quality there than others. So that's also some of the choices you have to make. Yeah, when you want to sort of get good results, do I really want to focus on the good quality data, or do I also want to like see what happens when I use the really old data? This amounts to about 12 million articles, and we basically look at also how things change over time. So we look at the first year of a decade, the fifth year, and the last year, and compare those to each other. And basically using rather old school shallow parsing, part-of-speech tag patterns, and then a log likelihood ratio for associativity, just to see what comes up with that. So basically, if you look at a sentence, there are the things people do, the things that those are the agents, things people having things done to them. The them are the patients and the way they are described, the people. So For example, Bob hit little Alice on the head. Bob is the agent doing the hitting. Alice is here described as little. I'm on purpose not using a offensive example here, but we have many offensive examples. And Alice is the patient being hit in this case. And basically, we did this for Dutch, but you have these verb patterns that are quite familiar with maybe old school NLP people that you can fairly easily define. So we look at nouns and the modifiers that come with nouns as the features. And then we look at what kind of instances, what kind of frequencies they have, and see if they have a stronger association than by chance. So we did a manual check on the patterns to see if they correctly actually extracted things. So we took a sample of 200 articles, and there was some OCR errors, there was some noise there, also some dependency parse errors, but overall these patterns are pretty simple. And if you keep it simple, then that actually gives you it actually makes it possible to do this, given that the texts are not always perfect. So we have the noun, the feature, and the role, and their frequencies. And then we use the log likelihood, which was introduced in 1993. But it's still kind of cool to see what comes out of there, and just to see how that you don't need an LLM for everything that you want to do. So basically, do we find any of these features? Do any of those come up in our analyses? And so here's the warning. There's going to be some terms. Again, this is what is in the data. So these are not in any way things that we support or that are our opinion. What you see here, the first term is the noun in the top there. These are modifiers. The numbers behind it are the years in which we found the strongest signal. And you see, for example, particular terms with a migrant, the babu, that's a female servant. So that person is carrying. So not all of it is negative, but there's definitely also some very negative connotations in there. So we also know that these terminologies, you kind of don't want to use them. And no, I'm not going to go into the whole allochtone thing in Dutch, because it's a particular type of migrant. The verbs are maybe even more interesting, and actually in the results I found those more offensive than maybe some of the nouns. So the actions associated with particular groups of people. So there we also see differences throughout time, but universally there's still a lot of racism, even in our newspapers, going up to the early 80s. So secondly, we looked at, so this was really per term, and then look at, well, what are kind of features that we see happening a lot? So that's basically turning the data on its side. So here again, we see certain things that you actually see in the media still, especially if you follow the news these days, unfortunately. These kind of narratives that have actually been in our newspapers for quite a while. And then, for example, the association of tribe with primitive, which is something that Words Matter definitely advises against, and that is just something that we see throughout. So that's a very strong association, unfortunately. Then what we wanted to do was see, can we actually identify new instances, so words that sort of behave similarly or that you find in similar contexts. And unfortunately, we do, and some of them are really still very much racist, even in current debate. So probably if we would extend this to current day things, it would maybe not change that much. So there's definitely also mixtures of racism and religion going on together, and just really weird ideas of also people's maybe physical activity. So all sorts of really very biased and outdated perspectives are definitely present. And then we leave it up to the museum or the gallery or the archive to how to deal with this. So one of the things we're experimenting with is maybe if some of these terms pops up, there's an info box about it. Some of the archives, they also have a form where you can say if you find a term, so you can notify them. Some of the pages that they have, some of the articles that are really sensitive, they might not be viewable if you are just at home. So for some actually very sensitive content, they were already experimenting with that. For example, from some Second World War content, you can only view that when you're actually on the premises. So that's also kind of more a situation that you would have in the traditional setting where you'd go to a museum where it's maybe a bit more curated. And that's really the conversation we're having with museums. So how do we then want to deal with this? Ryan is now also looking into some other domains. So looked at some online conversations on Reddit, as well as literature. Also, we didn't really look at the profiles of the newspapers, but we do know that some newspapers are maybe a bit more conservative and have particular perspectives. And also we're experimenting with some other methods like Bayesian methods to sort of see what is happening there. So that was the heavy part of my talk, but a bit of a lighter topic, because I do think you need to change it up every now and then. This was the Ode Europa project, which was a 3-year Horizon 2020 project that ran between 2021 and January 2021 and December 2023. And the idea was to firstly create AI techniques to identify information about smells in texts and images, and to help historians to create historical olfactory narratives. So to help them in their archival search to find information about smells. The other thing was to recognize and safeguard and promote smell heritage. Now, here we're really close to Grasse. You are probably much more aware of smell than most people in Europe. But part of the project was also talking to policymakers, talking to UNESCO, see how can we really put smell on the map of policymakers and heritage organizations to make sure it's protected more. Then also seeing, what is potentially the value of this. So would people pay extra for a museum ticket if the museum exhibits smell? And they would, but not too much. But at least the value was shown for that, and that's also how people responded there have been a bunch of museum exhibits, also some that were not organized by us, that people really enjoyed having this additional dimension, because it could also be a way for people who would maybe normally not go to a museum to still experience some of that. And actually we worked together with Euricom just across the street here. They did a really amazing job on the knowledge graph there. So this project was really, really super interdisciplinary. We had computer vision, which was done by our partners in Germany, the Friedrich Alexander Universität. They are one of the few places that do computer vision for heritage collections. So a lot of computer vision is optimized for photos, but when you look at paintings or drawings, you need to tweak things quite a bit. We did natural language processing, so analyzing text that was spread out over multiple partners, but led by Fondazione Bruno Kessler in Italy. The knowledge graph development was led by Euricom here. We had historians at York University looking into historical narratives. And then University College London was working on olfactory heritage science. So they actually have machines you can put a thing in and they can analyze the molecules of the smell. And they also did the impact measurement. So surveys among museum visitors, see how they respond to this. So I will briefly walk through all the different steps. There was the computer vision part, where the idea was to develop a computer vision smell detection model. So what we did was starting with defining the important concepts in a taxonomy and then have an army of annotators look at paintings, draw boxes around objects and say, well, this is a bird, this is a fish, this is a flower, this is a fruit, and actually for certain fruits and flowers, we went down in the taxonomy. So this is a rose, this is an iris, this is a peach, this is a grape. So we got this taxonomy. And the interesting thing about paintings is almost anything in there can smell. So how do you select the relevant objects? So that was really, you know, with the art historians and the smell historians, there are such people. I did not know this before I started the project, to decide on, well, these are really important. And of course, you have to make a choice. You can't do everything. Create a benchmark data set. So that was a good chunk of work, but that is also reusable for the community. We did a challenge where everyone else could give it their best. And there is a model, and we've actually also automatically annotated over 4,500 images that are now available through our knowledge graph with the annotations, so you can search for smelly pictures. The natural language processing, and I have a few more slides on that because that's actually something that I worked on in the team, is in a way it's similar to what we did for the computer vision, but then on text. So how do we actually recognize smells in text? Turns out not that much research was done on that. And here the problem was that the references to smells were far and few between. We don't talk about smell a lot in most texts. We selected text from 1600 to 1920 in 7 different languages across different domains for the benchmarks. So we had religious texts, we had legal texts, we had medical treatises, we had household books, literature. I think we had 10 different categories. Basically what we did there, we created this big benchmark data set where, as you can see, the colors, you select a word and say, this is a smell word. So the sentence talks about smell here. There's a person perceiving a smell, so that's another tag, and you link that to the smell word. There's potentially a quality, someone really likes the smell or doesn't. There might be saying it smells like, so describing the smell. There's something that emits a smell, so that would be the candle, the incense, the flower, the animal. And we basically created these for English, Italian, French, Dutch, German, Slovene, and Neo-Latin. We employed a big army of student assistants with this for this task. So we're very grateful for them, and actually most of them actually went on to now start their PhDs. So I think I was hearing that here too, if you do an internship somewhere and then it can lead to more things. And they're also co-authors on this paper where we describe the benchmark. So basically these are all the numbers on the benchmark. We try to collect as much for the different languages, but we do have to contend with the fact that not every language has the same number of resources. For example, there was not that many texts for Slovenian from before 1850 for all sorts of historical and political reasons. The creator, the bottom there, that was also an interesting one. We originally did not have that in our taxonomy, even though we talked a lot about the taxonomy. It only came about when some of our annotators mentioned, hey, I come across people putting together a perfume or lighting a candle, so or mixing together something that would then be smelly. So should we maybe do something with that? So that was only added during the annotation process, and yeah, not every some annotation processes had already been a bit farther, and also some languages they just did have not that many instances of that. So that's okay. It's not perfect, but we did the best we could in the time we had. Also interesting here, place and time. For those of you who know a bit more about named entity recognition, in our instances, place and time are often not, the place is often not a city like Amsterdam or a country, which is what you often see in named entity recognition when you look at locations. But it was in the kitchen or in the garden, things like that. So we really had to do some tweaking there. Similarly for time, it was not really dates, but it was in the morning, or in the evening, the smell of the flowers was the strongest, and things like that. So in that sense, it was really a different way of looking at data from what you would see in most tasks, which are obviously on newspaper data because it's easiest to come by. We have multiple classification setups. We looked at single task, multitask, monolingual, multilingual. We had a bunch of contemporary models, obviously. There's also quite a bit of work on historical models these days. So some of these were, so Macbeth and Gijsbert were actually developed in the Netherlands. For Neo-Latin, it didn't really make sense because it's kind of old anyway. And Slovenia, as I said, is a low resource language. So we did some spelling normalization for the historical processing. We use tenfold cross-validation. We have a lot of results. I'm only going to show the results in the contemporary models because actually they still outperform the historical models, even though our data was quite old in many instances. Probably something to do with the fact that these models are just larger. And also the multilingual model, in a lot of cases, outperformed the monolingual models. Also, I mean, we did choose languages that have something that are quite related. So that is also quite natural that we would really find that actually the fact that the multilingual model had all that information, we could really use that. Also, the first column, the smell word, that performed best. We do have the most information for that. So there's still a lot of room for improvement. We were under time pressure to make this all happen. So we're quite happy with this as a start. And, you know, this is really helpful already for scholars, because if we can already say, hey, this paragraph or this sentence actually talks about smell, that helps enormously. Now, it would be really nice if we get like 80, 90 on all the other things as well, but we also realized that was really not possible. So, you know, getting 80% on at least that is already helpful in the search. So how to organize this? We have this knowledge graph. This is the data model, which was presented at ESWC in 2022. I think it's one of the few papers co-authored by historians that won a Best Paper Award at a computer science conference. And that's also an interesting aspect of working in this interdisciplinary setting, in that this kind of publication model was also very new for our historians. So for them, conferences usually do not have a full paper that you submit. So this was also part of the process of working together And the other way around, when a historian goes, "Oh, I have to give a paper next week," and I'm like, "What?" I was like, "No, it's just an abstract, and I'm just going to present it." I was like, "Okay." I thought, "Full paper, ah." So that's how you learn. The knowledge graph can be browsed through the Explorer, so that's a visual interface developed by Euricom. And you can select the time there, and I need to hurry up a little bit. You can see the context in the word clouds, and then you see the cards that have that either the text source, or if you scroll down further, you can also see the images where we found gloves, or where the computer vision model thought it spotted a glove. And you can also do various selections there in the visualization. So you can query it directly via Sparkle. We also have some Jupyter notebooks, or nosebooks as we would like to call them, where you can query the visual corpus and the text corpus. And then what we also did is bringing smells to the public. And for that we have the historical scent collection, which has all the scents that we developed in the project. And basically what we did there is we worked with the museum, and in this case the painting you see here is Museum Ulm, for an exhibition where we said, well, you know, which objects have an interesting smell connection that would be interesting to talk about to audiences. So we identified recipes connected to these smells, for example, books of secrets, and sometimes medical treatises, and then we created briefs for IFF perfumers. So IFF is International Flavors and Fragrances. You've probably not heard of this, but you've used their product because they create scents for washing laundry detergent, shampoo, but they have a small unit as well that does these kind of artisanal projects. And we also refine the scents. So this is the portrait. It has a date. And then this is sort of the brief that we created. It's a bit small to read, but it basically gives an overview of what is the goal of this smell, what do we expect, if we have an old recipe, what is the old recipe, and then basically they went to work in mixing these scents, and they would send them to us, and we got different versions, and then we had to sort of see which version do we want to use in our exhibition, because some versions they would have maybe one of the scents a bit stronger than the other. So what is the story you want to tell there? It's like a draft of a paper, like, you know, do we want to tailor this a bit more to this audience or to that audience? So we're going to do some smelling here. Just for the people here, for the people online, sorry. If you look at this, what do you think would be an interesting smell object here? I don't know if everyone can see the image. It's not the fur, but it's a good one. It's a good guess. He's got something in his hand, exactly. It's not a weapon. So he's holding a rosary that has a pomander, and pomander is he's rich. You can tell that by the fur. In this case, it's scented jewelry, and it contains various aromatics that people also thought at the time that if a bad smell gets to you, it causes disease. So if the bad smell couldn't get to you, it would protect you. You would not get ill. If you were not rich, you would have maybe just a fabric bag and you would put all the spices in there, but he was rich, so he had it in some nice valuable metals. So I was stupid enough that I didn't check before I left Amsterdam that I had enough for everyone, so you're going to have to share a little bit on smelling. Oh. If you just pass it on like a little bit. And what helps a little bit if you pass it under multiple of under both your nostrils. And then there's top notes and base notes. Probably this corner of the room is smelling a little bit because I have it open here. They're all the same, so you can just pass one. Yeah.
Just continue to pass them.
So do you recognize anything in there? Yep. No, but I can see why. Musk, yes. So I realize I'm going to have to hurry up a little bit. Yeah. So we found a historical recipe that listed nutmeg, rosemary, cloves, rose, lavender, and lemon, and as well as a balm that was made up of nutmeg, cinnamon, cloves, lavender, marjoram, rosemary, ambergris, musk, and civet. And they would just mix that, and this would be something that people would make in-house. Our perfumer came up with rosemary, oregano, cinnamon, rose, lavender, clove, and civet, ambergris, and musk. Also civet, ambergris, and musk, these are now synthetic because of animal welfare.
Synthetic because of animal welfare.
And this was used in guided tours in Ulm Museum, and the Ulm Museum in Germany, they were very happy with this. And basically, you know, people had a really, really amazing response to that. Now, of course, we have to see if this becomes more common, whether the novelty wears off. Although we, if you go to the CES, people are working on like smell devices for virtual reality and those kind of things. So we'll see where it goes. And also in our surveys, we saw that people really had a very positive response to that. Also, not all the smells in here are nice, but that also adds sort of an interesting dimension. If you want to smell more, on Saturday, Raphaël Troncy from Eurocom will be presenting at the Médiathèque here in Antibes during the Journée Européenne du Patrimoine. So that was just a really, really quick teaser of some of the things we do. Yeah, I hope I got you curious about some of the work. We do a lot more, so some of the people on my team are working on digital editions and also improving TEI XML, maritime history, reception of literature, migrant history, missing data, new Latin drama, parliamentary data. Also, some colleagues launched a new journal, the Computational Humanities Research Journal, which is really computer science style. There's also a conference, but sort of, yeah, more coming at the humanities, I think from a computer science perspective in terms of also how we publish. So it's open for submissions. And I really like this quote by Sebastian Thrun, who used to be a Stanford professor and is now doing self-driving cars. So I think there should be a real closer link to AI and humanities, which is also what you're working on. So thank you so much.
Thank you.